Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. When Alan Dershowitz tried to get David Boies removed from the Virginia Roberts case, he did not expect that he was going to end up dealing with somebody like Chuck Cooper. Chuck Cooper is a pretty famous litigator, and he is somebody who has dealt with some serious cases throughout history. He's not somebody that's going to walk into a courtroom and get walked all over. He does the walking, right? He shows up, and he's the kind of litigator that busts heads in the courtroom. And Dershowitz, in his folly, thought it would be a good idea to go after Boies to get Boies removed, thinking that he would leave Virginia exposed without a fantastic lawyer to step in and help her out. Well, he never expected Chuck Cooper to come in, just like nobody ever expected the Spanish Inquisition. And now, of course, we've seen recently that Dershowitz is trying to maneuver to try and get rid of Cooper as well. He doesn't want anything to do with Chuck Cooper, folks. Not one thing at all. Especially considering he's not going to defend himself in the courtroom, right? He has a lawyer to do that, at least I think. I don't think that Dershowitz is going to defend himself. I mean, he might. But Chuck Cooper is going to come to bring that pain and bring the thunder. This is not a guy that you want standing across from you in a courtroom, right? This is somebody who's been doing it for quite some time. This is somebody who has dealt with the Supreme Court of the United States. This is somebody who has worked for the Department of Justice, etc., etc. This is a man with a very valid history of practicing law and taking on people like Dershowitz. So today, now that we have a little bit of time, considering there's no new news really to cover in the case and we're all caught up, I figured it would be a perfect time to go back and take a look at Dershowitz getting Boies kicked off and then realizing, well, now I'm dealing with Chuck Cooper. And AboveTheLaw.com had a really great article back in November that I archived to read here on the podcast, and I just haven't gotten around to it yet. So today is the perfect day for that, folks. We're going to check out this AboveTheLaw.com article and see what the author, Joe Patrice, has to say about Dershowitz getting Boies booted. This article was authored, like I said, by Joe Patrice. It was originally published on November 1st of 2019. Dershowitz wanted to get Boies disqualified, so now he has to deal with another famous SCOTUS litigator. Chuck Cooper is taking on the Dershowitz defamation case. Be careful what you wish for. Alan Dershowitz publicly challenged the woman who accused him of partaking in the Jeffrey Epstein sex trafficking scandal to sue him for defamation. Virginia Roberts went ahead and filed suit. And look, when you challenge somebody like Virginia, who is really sticking to her guns and who has really come forward and shown incredible bravery in the face of some of the most powerful people in the world, people like Dershowitz, people like Wexner, people like Dubin, etc., etc. And he says to Virginia, right, all right, well, sue me then for defamation. And Virginia says, all right, you MF, I'm going to. You sick, disgusting bastard, now you're getting sued. So once that occurred, well, of course, Dershowitz went into Dershowitz mode, right? Becomes a knife fight. The second Dershowitz gets involved with anything, it becomes an absolute knife fight. But he does it behind the scenes, right? He's that kind of guy. He's not an in-your-face kind of guy. It's behind the scenes, using loopholes and his connections. Virginia Roberts went ahead and filed suit, prompting Dershowitz to complain that they had no basis to sue him. And this is what he always does, right? He always says, well, sue me. And then he complains when he gets sued. And then he countersues. And he's just such a clown at this point. I don't know how anyone can take him seriously. And the fact that the Libertarian candidate, Joe Jorgensen, had him as one of her choices for Supreme Court of the United States, even though she went back and took him off the list. The fact that he was even on that list in the beginning is mind-numbing to me. Alan Dershowitz does not belong near the Oval Office, the President, the Supreme Court, or any of it, okay? Alan Dershowitz belongs in a courtroom to handle his business in this case, because this is what he should be focusing on, okay? Not the libertarian candidate talking about how he's going to be one of her people on the list for a nominee for the Supreme Court. That, my friends, does not work, okay? The judge told him that his argument was ridiculous, but in the process granted Dershowitz disqualification motion, arguing that David Boies and Boies Schiller should be disqualified as Roberts' counsel because Dershowitz intends to accuse the firm of a conspiracy to blackmail him, and that therefore makes them fact witnesses. And it's just like when the government says, oh, well, we can't release that information because it's under investigation right now and it's critical to our case. That's what he's trying to do here. Dershowitz was trying to sue Boies and Schiller to get them off the case so it would leave Virginia exposed. And the way he went about that was claiming that he was being blackmailed. So Preska says, all right, if that's the case, if that's the way things are, fine. And she granted his motion here. But I'll tell you, now that I look back on it and we have hindsight as our friend, it looks like Preska was giving Dershowitz enough rope to proverbially hang himself with here, right? Because we see the way Preska has been forceful dealing with Dershowitz now in the future. So I think she granted him this motion, and again, this is just my theory. I think she granted him this motion originally so that it wouldn't come back to bite her later on. And Dershowitz, for his part, well, he thought he was getting rid of Boies. He had no idea that he was getting rid of Lennox Lewis and bringing in Mike Tyson. And that's basically what Chuck Cooper is in the courtroom, folks. This guy comes in and he does his job. This is the sort of litigator that I would want defending me. And, this is not what Dirty Dersh expected. And you see by his assaults on Cooper and company as we get closer to things coming to a head that Mr. I kept my underpants on except for the time I was at Martha's Vineyard in the naked volleyball game. Well, you see him getting more and more unhinged as we go. In fact, so unhinged, it's like a cracked house door in Baltimore. That's how unhinged this guy is at this point. The strategy here was a gamble that without Boies on the case, Roberts would struggle to find competent counsel to keep the claim going. And that's why he did it, right? Again, another one of these powerful-ass members of so-called polite society exerting their extreme and almost unmatched power and connections when it comes to court cases. If there is a loophole on the books, folks, believe me when I tell you, Mr. Dershowitz knows it and has probably exploited it at some point in his career. It's why this disqualification argument was such troubling precedent. If pro bono counsel can get kicked off a case so easily, it can close doors to justice for many litigants. And I agree with that, right? Again, I think that it was, now that I have hindsight to refer back to it, I think that it was part of Preska's game plan in this case. But it does set a pretty troubling precedent, right? Pro bono lawyers being kicked off cases. And if it was anyone besides Dershowitz, I doubt that this motion would have gotten passed in the first place. I think that because it was Dershowitz and because of the extreme power he wields behind the scenes with his friends and those who are in positions of power, that Preska understands the stakes here and again wanted to give him enough rope for him to make the mistake on his own. That said, I noted at the time that Roberts was likely to find another top-notch litigator willing to take on the specific matter, and that's turned out to be true. 100%. Look, obviously I am not a lawyer, as I've mentioned a million times, and you can tell from the stupidity that tumbles out of my mouth. But if I was a lawyer, I most assuredly would offer my services to every one of these survivors, whoever needed it, and I would do it pro bono for not one single cent. That's how important this case is. And I'm telling you folks right now, this is one of the most important cases, at the very least in my lifetime. Justice needs to be served in this case more than any other case that I can imagine or I can remember, because there is so much on the line. Chuck Cooper of Cooper & Kirk filed pro hoc papers yesterday looking to take over Virginia Roberts' case. This means I kept my underpants on Dershowitz now faces a seasoned Supreme Court litigator that the National Law Journal ranks as one of the 10 best civil litigators in Washington. So if you're one of the 10 best civil litigators in the swamp disgustoid pit we call Washington, then you must be on your game. You must be coming to work with your lunchbox and your boots strapped up. And that is exactly the kind of lawyer Chuck Cooper is. The kind of lawyer that guys like Dershowitz want nothing to do with. In fact, as you see here, this strategy is fired big time on him. He'd be better off dealing with Boies in the courtroom, in my opinion. A former Reagan administration Department of Justice official, Cooper is well known for representing conservative bigwigs like Jeff Sessions and John Bolton and taking up right-wing causes in federal court, from representing the NRA to defending religion in schools in Lee versus Weissman. So what that really means is the guy has a lot of experience in the courtroom. Again, I don't care who lawyers' clients are. That's not my problem with Alan Dershowitz. Everybody deserves representation in the United States of America. I don't care how heinous your crime was. That is certainly not my problem with this situation with Dershowitz. My problem with Dershowitz is the credible accusations made by two women at least, and the way things were manipulated in that first trial of Jeffrey Epstein. That shit don't sit right with me, folks. These guys going in there and destroying these little girls' reputations by calling them whores and worse. Yeah, that doesn't sit well with me, and it never will. And Dirty Dersh will always get the thunder here on this podcast for the credible accusations that he has not answered for, and the fact that him and the prosecution worked in concert to make sure that his client, Jeffrey Epstein, got a sweetheart deal. That's not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to win that in the courtroom, not behind the scenes, backroom dealing, and only bringing one girl before the grand jury. That's not going to be anything that anybody gives you any props for, okay? Nobody thinks that's a good job besides you and your scumbag friends. Cooper was even considered a frontrunner for the Solicitor General post that eventually went to Noel Francisco. In fact, it was Cooper who argued on behalf of California's Proposition 8 in the landmark marriage equality case won by Boies and Gibson Dunn's Ted Olson. Cooper would go on to plan his own daughter's same-sex wedding, so he's probably happy, in retrospect, to have lost that one. Look, again, I'm not sitting here saying that these litigators always argue for things I agree with, right? I think that anybody who wants to get married should be able to get married. I don't care. I don't know how many times I need to express that. You know, in this day and age, we have so many bigger problems than who loves who that I can't even begin to start listing them for you. So if you want to be married to a man or someone who is transgendered or whatever it may be, I don't care. As long as whatever you're engaging in is consensual, I say, God bless, do whatever you want. Find some happiness in life, because guess what, folks? It's fleeting. We don't have much of it around us, especially right now. So whenever you can find a little bit of it, whenever there's some happiness for you to grab, I suggest that's exactly what you do. And if that is you're in love with someone of the same sex, who cares, right? Who cares? And I'm sure that Mr. Cooper, even though he was arguing on behalf of Prop 8, he himself has a daughter who had a same-sex wedding, so I'm sure that he had mixed emotions as well arguing into it. So, look, for me, I don't I don't understand how anyone could have a problem with people being in love. It's really not my business. And I try to stay in my lane with stuff like that, especially because guess what, man? There's a big, wide, gigantic world out there. And people are going to do some shit you don't agree with. People are going to live their life in ways that you don't agree with. But guess what? So what? It's not your business. For Dershowitz, the defamation case will roll on with another thorough and aggressive heavy hitter in that plaintiff's counsel seat. And I think that Virginia really did herself a lot of favors here with Chuck Cooper, and I think it's a tip of the cap should be made towards Mr. Cooper as well for taking this case. When you're staring down somebody like Alan Dershowitz and you're a survivor of sexual abuse and trafficking, it has to be a daunting process, right? Knowing that you have one of the most powerful lawyers maybe to ever do it standing across from you, defaming you, and at the same time that he's doing that, you are credibly accusing him of sexually assaulting you while you were being trafficked by his best buddy, Jeffrey Epstein. Talk about a Gordian knot that needs to be worked on. And that, my friends, is what Chuck Cooper plans on doing. If you'd like to contact me, you could do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All right, everybody, all of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. I will be back later on today, and we will pick up the conversation where we left it off. Hope you all have a fantastic afternoon.